Hello, good morning. It's the 12th of July. I've got so much to talk about today. I would love to take your questions if you join me, but I haven't really advertised this very much. I'm still getting the hang of live streams. I will advertise them more once I'm confident with them. But if you do join me, please do ask questions. So the first thing I have to do today is talk about this fabulous book that I've been sent. Quite a lot of the books around here, including, say, this one recently, sent to me by just for free review by people who've written them, and they're always fabulous people, great people to get to know. And I've become really good friends with Ed, who wrote this book off the back of it, but that's about secondary maths. So we have a project going on for secondary maths with that. Hello, Helen. It's lovely to see you. If you're there, if you're live, please introduce yourself. Please send me your questions. The reception videos are really helpful. I am so glad they were the first ones I did. And to say I was awkward and scared is a little bit of an understatement. So sorry for all the jickiness. I mean, my videos are still very, very amateur, but they've got a bit slicker since then. When all this is done, at some stage, I intend to come back and redo every series co-produced. So I'll advertise that I'm redoing them and share them one at a time and ask for input and improvement and give credit to the people who input into them. That's my dream. But some way off that yet. The rest of this year is just going to be hell for leather, trying to cover every aspect of the primary curriculum. Anyway, back to this book. Laurie, are you there? You said you were going to join me, but I know it's after 1 a.m. Canadian time now. This book covers in a really, really simple and reassuring way all the primary maths concepts with clear explanations and straightforward questions. And it's really nice. It's designed to be used by a catch-up tutor, really, I think, who's working one-to-one or in small groups with children who've struggled with their primary maths and are now at secondary school and really need to go back out over it. Laurie markets it as being a push-ahead book for kids who have not yet finished primary, a consolidation or revision book, or a catch-up book. And it could be all those things, but you need an adult working with the child on this because the explanations, if you're quite young, would be challenging. They're really good, they're really clear. If I'd been writing this book, I would certainly have targeted some of the adult special needs catch-up market. There's a lot of adults there who are not able to access a GCSE or a 14 to 16 qualification course and need to do something like this first. I also think this would be a fantastic book for use in prisons where people have limited access to IT. It's really reassuring. It's just the language is calm, and a tutor who works with those students intermittently can go through and work out what they have and haven't understood and help them catch that up with them. Hello, I can see some people are watching. It'd be lovely if you've any questions, just share them or tell me what's going on in your life with maths education, because I'm curious. I miss the staff room gossip. I'm not there. Usually I'm going around from school to school, running training and catching up with all the crack as we stay in Cumbria. And just finding out behind the scenes what it's like for teachers on the ground at any point in time. And I do miss that. So big shout out for Laurie publishing this book. It is a nightmare, self-publishing books. Actually, I don't know if this is self-published. Could well be. They're so hard to market. I wrote a book. It's a fabulously entertaining book. Healthcare Co-Production, a personal overview. I know you won't be buying that if you're watching this channel. But I thought if I just made it cheap and sold it just for £5, it would sell, but it doesn't sell because you need the whole marketing strategy, and I have so much more respect for publishers now. So if you are writing a book in maths education, I'm really keen to give you any help I can to promote it to the right audience, if that audience is primary maths teachers or people who might be interested in primary maths. How come I was writing this as a maths educator? Well, in the UK, until 2010, we worked in a way where maths education policy was co-produced. Everyone was involved in creating it. And in 2010, that stopped. And since then, it's all been written by one minister who has very particular ideas. And it's not even trialled properly. He has money for testing his ideas, but he just tests them to check that they are his ideas rather than to analyse the impact on teachers. So a lot of the time over recent years, I've been working across in health as well as education, because it's been so frustrating not to have the chance to learn all those skills of how part of the world should be run. This is how policy should be created, and I hope it is. If you're not in the UK, I hope it is in the country that you live in. So I've been involved in lots of really interesting conversations this week about how people are going to cope in the autumn when they go back to teaching, and in particular the challenges of dealing with classes where some children have done all the work and others haven't done any. And of course we may have the added chaos in that schools may shut again, and we might have blended learning, some distance learning, some in-school learning. Anything could happen. So for the last 10 years in the UK, in England, we've entirely rolled out stepwise small steps teaching, which is where you have a really detailed plan of learning for the school, and all the children learn one concept together at a time, and then they're all ready to progress to the next concept. And that's a real challenge for this particular situation. And it's actually, I've been doing the opposite in Cumbria, because in Cumbria it's always been chaos, because we have more than half our schools have mixed year classes, and you assume they're going to be like mixed year 1, 2, mixed year 3, 4. So they're going to be quite predictable, but in reality it's never like that. Every class is different, and every teacher has to plan for themselves, and they have to work straight from the curriculum, which is something most teachers don't do now. And they can't do the stepwise teaching, because if they're teaching 3 year groups in the same class, you can't do that for every year. So they have different ways of teaching, which we call low floor, high ceiling teaching, where they teach with structure, so that children with all levels of attainment and different ages and different points in the curriculum can access the lesson, deeply understand what's going on, and fly with that lesson. It's highly skilled teaching, and it's more complex to understand, because it all has to be in your head, what you're doing as a teacher. Whereas most teachers have it written out for them, so they can outsource a lot of their thinking into the pre-written plan. So if you want to understand this, one way to do it is to watch my year 1 training. If you go down and find the year 1 playlist, I've actually completely shared the year 1 training for this. It only lasts 2 hours, and that's all it takes to deeply understand what you're doing for year 1. And it explains how we teach each key structure of maths, like the number line or the counting beads or the number square, how we teach it in tremendous depth, and the curriculum flows from that, rather than starting with the curriculum and adding the apparatus on. It's like starting with the structures and adding the apparatus and the curriculum around that. The other bit of insight would be in in the year 1 teaching, it talks about how we do that, but we also use really sophisticated questioning strategies to get every child unpacking their own thinking, and all of those are embedded into that year 1 training as well. So if you are a teacher or a teacher educator, that really gets the heart of what I'm doing. Hello, I can see I've got more people join me. If you're here, please say hi, and if you've got a question, please post it. I love taking your questions live. So there's another, if you scroll down my YouTube channel, you'll find a lecture that I did, a seminar for teacher trainers and educators at the University of Cumbria, which explains the different structures and gets into what those fundamental structures are, which is so little talked about. It's quite frustrating because a lot of government guidance has been published in the last week that starts to talk about it. It gets it all wrong. It's really poorly understood, and I'm banging my head off the floor going, oh, that could have been so much better. But I know that guidance will be useful for a lot of teachers too, so I mustn't say that too much because it's not fair. But it's just so frustrating that people like me are excluded. Hello, lovely to see you. How are you doing? Hope you're going to have a lovely Sunday. It's looking sunny here in Liverpool. It's nice to see. I'll be getting out with the kids soon, hopefully, or at least the child that's around today. Got her some inline skates. Don't know how those are going to go, but we thought it might be quite a good socially distanced sport. And that's the reward for cancelling her residential. So that's what we've done with some of the refund. Could be a disaster. Been watching YouTube videos on how to learn to inline skate. Anyway, on the issue of stepwise small steps teaching versus low floor, high ceiling teaching, I thought what I'd do this week is take one of my videos that I'm going to film this week, which is long multiplication, and actually in the video show how long multiplication would be taught in a small steps way, and then show how it would be taught in a low threshold, high ceiling way with structure. So essentially, if you're doing a long multiplication, like say 23 times 47, there's a lot of entry points for that if you're using a small steps process. So your child needs to know the distributive law of multiplication. So they would need to know, well, it depends which way you do it, but they would need to know that you can split that, say, into 20 times 47 and 3 times 47. And they would need to know how to do each of those parts quite fluently. So they'd need to know the distributive law, they'd need to know short multiplication, they'd need to know multiplication by a multiple of 10. And then they're going to be able to follow the standard long multiplication method. Now, that's a high floor, because there's a lot in that, and for a teacher to have a class of children who can all do that and so can all access that lesson is a huge challenge, especially in the current circumstances. If you've got kids who've been regularly with you all year and you've done this with them and they've had low absence, then it's doable. But in a low floor, high ceiling way of teaching long multiplication, instead of starting with this kind of abstract structure, we start with the fundamental structure for multiplication, which at primary school is array. So we would start with this challenge, something like this. So this is 19 times 15 as an array. And we check that children understand that if they find the total number of squares in this, they've found the answer to this question. So the floor for this lesson is simply understanding that multiplication is that many of this many, or the other way round, just turn it round, which is a really, really useful thing to review and revise because it's fundamental and less children deeply understand that than you think. And then all they've got to do in their first lesson is count squares. And you can put a few of these round to keep them busy, and you can encourage them to start to try and find some shortcuts. Can they find any way of counting these rather than counting them all one at a time? Can you see any shortcuts? And it'll keep your class of really children who are attaining at a very high level and children who are really struggling with some of those key concepts for accessing the other level. It'll keep them busy, happily busy, talking to each other, trying to develop their own strategies. So some of them will start to section off 100s, 10 by 10 squares, and they can count those quickly, and they start to talk about what's possible. And then you can start to nudge them towards cutting this with a single line. So that would be cutting it here, like that. And talking about, well, if we just made one cut, how could we find how many squares are here? And how could we find how many are here? And this would be 10 times 19. So if you've done a bit of multiplying by 10 with a bit of practice, you can rehearse that and they can do it, but they can also count them to check if they're not sure on that skill. And this would be 5 times 19, which is short multiplication. And again, if they're not particularly secure in that, then they can check their answers by counting the squares to build their confidence, build their security. And you can, if you go back to your short multiplication lesson, you can see how we can use the Dean's apparatus to check their answer there. So this would be lesson 1. This would be maybe the end of lesson 1 where you're starting to talk with children about this strategy. In lesson 2, we'd come back and do some more of these so they build their confidence, and then we'd start to organise this as a formal calculation. And then we'd introduce ones where one of the numbers is more than 20, and we'd build up the strategy for multiplication that way, taking the whole class with us. But this is high ceiling because using this fundamental structure also allows children to talk about other methods of long multiplication and to think way beyond just simple long multiplication of numbers. This is a fundamental structure that underpins expansion of algebraic brackets. It underpins all multiplication and division. So your conversation can go anywhere. And if your class are used to working in this way, it will. It doesn't at first, it takes time. So in the past, a lot of these skills of low floor, high ceiling have been passed person to person by teachers working together. And that was really under attack from all the government interventions to force people to use small steps approaches, where schools are getting emailed 3 or 4 times a week telling them that they should be using the government NCTM training, that's what it does. And all the maths hubs in England are set up so they're not allowed to share information about training like the training I offer, because you have to have government approved training to be allowed for maths hubs to mention it. So it's really, really hard to share information. So that's why I'm trying to free share the training for all of this on this channel. So by the end of 2020, there will be videos on every single topic in primary maths education to know how to do it in this way. So a teacher can watch a 10 or 15-minute video and then deeply know in their own head how they can teach that topic in a way that's going to engage and challenge all their kids and deliver mastery without them having to rely on a pre-written lesson by lesson scheme. Oh, thank you so much, Helen. Really appreciate that encouragement. It is often lonely here. This is just my personal passion. It has been for the last 10 years to try and preserve and encourage this type of teaching, because I saw it eradicated in secondary teaching and I saw the consequences, because I was a secondary school head of maths and I used a lot of these strategies to work with the classes of children who were on the verge of exclusion, who had no confidence with maths and hadn't had for years, had huge gaps in their learning. And these strategies worked and delivered incredible results, and the school I was in rapidly came out of special measures and we got stunning results. But nobody seemed to. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, like I say, encouragement. It's been 10 years of being a complete financial basket case and not being able to take the kids on holiday and so on. I wish, thank you. Well, yeah, and one of the key things is that primary maths teaching is so difficult. Not even if you were well taught, you won't remember how you were taught when you were under 7. And a lot of the things you were taught when you were less than 7 have become subconscious. You don't think about them when you do them. So teachers need to be taught how to teach each key thing that children need to learn. Especially in England, where we teach so much to the under 7s. It's really technical, it's really difficult, and it's much more challenging than secondary teaching, because kids at secondary are so consciously aware of the processes that they're using, and they can put them in their heads and think about them and manipulate them. But young children, their brains are certainly before the age of 7 for most of them, their brains aren't sufficiently well developed to do that. So you have to have a much more multisensorial experience to support learning. So what have I published this week? I've lost track. and just thinking the video on Roman numerals and teaching Roman number and number systems, that went live yesterday, and I really enjoyed doing it in the end, despite Roman numerals being a Go-vism. I was able to put lots into it that I really believe will make great maths teaching and great lessons and help teachers to enjoy teaching that topic, even though it doesn't really belong, and was an imposition, and no maths education expert would have put it in that way anyway. And then the video I've got going live in 10 minutes, what's it on? It's on mental addition and subtraction for 9 to 11-year-olds. So I've already published a video in the 7 to 9 series which talks about 6 strategies for mental addition and subtraction at that level. We review those 6 strategies with large numbers and decimal numbers. In the previous video, they were just done with whole numbers up to 1,000. And then we talk about, hang on, I work in junior school. Any advice for adapting year 3 to spot and fill gaps? Yes. So the year 3 teaching, I have if you go to my Facebook group, which is Expert Primary Maths Teaching, and you go to, it's Expert Primary Maths Teaching on Facebook, and you go to the file section. If you scroll right down, you have to go down 3 or 4 pages, you'll finally find a year 3 planning guide. And it's page per term. It's the essence of what you need to cover. And there's a curriculum document next to it in the list that shows how you're covering everything. It's cross-linked. Now, in a couple of weeks, maybe next week, certainly during the summer holiday, I'm going to review that document and republish it with links, so there's lots of videos to give a deeper explanation of some of the things that I just put into a sentence, but I know a lot of teachers won't quite follow because they're not used to this type of teaching. And over the summer, I'm also going to create a single introduction to year 3 video, which explains the key elements of this type of teaching and introduces you to the revised versions of those documents and to the videos. So that document is there right now as an indication, and if you look on my channel, the 7 to 9 number series covers a lot of the content already. So the videos that will be there by the end of the summer are already there on my channel. And then I will review that document again at October week, by which time all the videos will be live. So the ones on number are live, but the ones on shape, position, measure, data, they're going live. They should be live by October week. They're October half term, there or thereabouts. And then I'll republish that document and probably redo the introduction. Thank you. And please just share in groups and stuff if you think this stuff is useful. Also, if you go to my website, authenticmaths.uk, I can do very short CPD by Zoom for your staff to introduce them and this stuff to them and encourage them and inspire them. So there's 2 ways of doing that. One is with a whole staff, and that would be from September, and of course, by then, all the planning guides will have been reviewed and will be live and will be video linked. Certainly with enough to get you going until I review them at October half term and add the final videos. So I can do that, and it's just a really short session to totally encourage people they can do it. And the other kind of training that I do is where you've got a particular member of staff or a particular year group that you're concerned about, which is often either because they've just moved into that year and maybe they're the only teacher for that year, and suddenly they've got to get to grips with it, all that maths, and they've come maybe from year 5 to year 2, and they're just like, help, I need some professional development. And I can go through this sort of same kind of training that's on the website, although it's only there for year 1. I'll be getting there with the rest of it, but I tailor it all to them. So we talk about what's already in the school and what the school wants to retain, and we build from that. And we start from the knowledge of the teacher. So Lots of it I skip over because the teacher just gets it instantly. But the bits that they struggle with, we can really lean into and discuss and make sure they've properly understood it. So that's low-cost CPD. Right, I think it's time to finish this because that video is going live at 9:30, and I have discovered that if my YouTubes run over half an hour, it becomes almost almost impossible to upload them. It'll take quite a long time for this one, but it'll be live later today if you want to watch it. So thank you so much for joining me. I should be back every Sunday. I'm a bit puzzled about the 9th of August at the minute because that's a day when my family are getting together to celebrate 20 years since my mum passed away, and it'll be a really good occasion because she led a good life and it'll be something to celebrate. So I'm not quite sure if I can make it then, but if I can, I might be sitting next to St James's Park back in Geordieland where I grew up. I don't know if that shows at all. It shows some of the time, especially when I've had a pint of Newcastle Brown. Anyway, hope you have a great Sunday. Thank you so much for joining me. And as ever, I have no idea how to stop this, but I'll puzzle it out. Thank you. Bye for now.